I'm on a quest to beat and rate every single PlayStation 2 RPG, TRPG, action RPG, and everything in between. That's over 160 titles. After I beat a game, I'll be making a video where I go through the 10 things I liked and 10 things I did not like in my playthrough. I'll also be giving each game an overall rating and comparing it to the other completed titles. If you want to see my full playthrough, check out my second channel, Low Cloud Dane Gameplay. Now let's get started.
Low Cloud Dane.
Before I get started, I want to let you all know that I created a document that anyone following this channel can access by clicking on the link in the description below. This document shows everything I've completed, along with everything I'm currently playing, along with the complete list of RPGs I plan on beating. I've also included the date I beat them, the length of the playthrough, and their score. Yes, I have decided that I will be scoring these games as I play through them. I've included the criteria in the document for anyone who's curious. Anyway, let's get started with the retrospective of Shining Tears. I'm starting to realize that there are going to be two types of bad games in this challenge. The first are games that are built poorly, with mechanics that are either broken or underdeveloped. The second is the one I fear the most. Games that aren't fundamentally broken in any way, but just aren't fun. Shining Tears was one of those games. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. If you would like to skip the details and just hear a summary of my thoughts, then skip ahead to the time on the screen. For everyone else, let's look at 10 things I liked and 10 things I did not like about Shining Tears. Dislike 10. The main cast character models. Shining Tears has a surprisingly large cast of characters. They're represented in still 2D artwork and in-game 3D models. Weirdly enough, some of the in-game models actually looked pretty good, especially the bosses. But damn, if these aren't the ugliest, most soulless eyes I've ever seen. I'm not sure why these look so bad, but they do. Some of the character models aren't terrible. Ryuna and Pios don't look that bad. But Elwyn, Lazarus, and especially Xeon just look uncanny. I'm not entirely opposed to chibi-style characters, but this was not a win. Like 10. New party members in the late game. Like I said, Shining Tears has a pretty big cast. In the beginning, you have access to 5 party members plus Xeon. But as you progress your playthrough, you will gain 2 additional party members, Kiner and Cupido. The best part is that both these characters come leveled, which means that you don't have to grind them up in order to use them. Dislike 9. Targeting during battle. Let's start here. The battle system in this game is passable at best. It tries, but like I said in the opening, it's not fun. Ultimately though, it's not broken apart from targeting. Because the 3D models are rendered fixed models and not true 3D, movement can be a little janky. But what truly causes issues is enemy hitboxes and targeting. I can't tell you how many times I was swinging my sword straight at an enemy, but made no contact. Targeting from long range attacks is even worse. Luckily, I unlocked Xeon's AoE attack early, which meant that I could ignore the targeting issues. Like 9, the final boss. Boss fights in this game suck. They aren't fun in the least. The final boss was the only exception. It was actually quite clever, at least in Shining Tears standards. You see, the boss has an attack that hits the entire battlefield that's open to you. At first, I wasn't sure how to dodge this until I started attacking its arms. If you push the arms back far enough, you can dodge the attack, which is good since the status effect you get from the attack is pretty much instant death. Once I learned the pattern of the boss, I was able to subdue it and beat the game, which was a blessing. Dislike 8. The characters fall flat. I do have to give Shining Tears props for trying to create an engaging cast of characters. Xeon has 2 personalities, Nij is a secret princess, Mao is a traitor. On paper, they probably all seemed like a decent band of protagonists, but in practice, each one was just lame. They weren't cliches as much as their design would lead you to believe. They were more complex than you would think. The problem is that I just didn't care. I neither cared about their outcomes, nor did I care to see how their stories tied up. It's the worst kind of criticism, apathy. I think it mainly boils down to the initial setup. The first hour of the story covers a lot of ground. The group of heroes get introduced one after another until they've formed their mercenary group. Shieldia is besieged, and the ragtag group of heroes become the city's defenders. All of this happens so fast that each individual character's motives are rushed to get to the war. I don't like when games take too long to give you the party members, but in this case, I think developers could have taken a little longer. What results is that each character's emotional peak falls completely flat. Like 8. mission progress and XP. This is a quick one. In Shining Tears, you'll spend the majority of your time on missions. And sometimes those missions, especially the story missions, can be long. Like 30 to 40 minutes long. If Xeon dies during the mission, you will fail it. But you won't have to start over. You'll wake up in the Hub Tavern with all your experience you collected, and will be able to begin the mission right where you left off. Apparently somebody on the development team thought, we better do this or else our terrible game would be even worse. Dislike 7. Undead enemies. There are a few different enemy types, but ultimately they boil down to 4 varieties. Enemies that dash at you, enemies that run away from you, enemies that fly, and undead enemies. The majority of the mobs you fight are the dash at you kind. Enemies that run away are extremely annoying due to the targeting issues I mentioned, and flying enemies are annoying because they can fly up to an area where you can't hit them, so you just have to wait for them to come back down. But the worst variety is the undead enemies. The undead have to be defeated multiple times before they go down for good. Normal enemies already take too long to kill. Having fodder respawn just drags out the battles. Luckily, my son Jet and I chose the healer Ryuna for a second player, and she came with a handy but annoying team attack that can exorcise the undead after you felled them once. But if you're not fast enough, they'll get back up and the monotony starts all over. Like 7. Skill and stat point distribution. I've made this argument in previous reviews, but choice is possibly the most important thing in an RPG. It's literally in the name. Role-playing implies that you take up a role and decide where to go from there. Each party member in Shining Tears has a list of skills, and each level up you get skill points you can put into their individual skills, passive skills, or team skills. I like this because it at least gives you the illusion of a fun game. You can also distribute stat points among 4 categories. Unfortunately, the game didn't really explain this, and I didn't notice until I was halfway through my playthrough. At this point, enemies were taking forever to kill. I spotted it by chance and poured all my accumulated points into strength, which hardly made a difference. Dislike 6. Forced party members and leveling. There were 2 times that my son Jet and I struggled in Shining Tears. The first was the last few missions before we discovered stat distribution. Bosses were killing us in one hit and we couldn't figure out why. Come to find out, our HP hadn't increased at all during the first half of the game. The second time we struggled was the first instance where player 2 was locked to a specific character. You see, there's a story mission where the Elves force is attacked and you must fight to free it alongside Elwyn. The only problem was that we had been using Ryuna the entire time and Elwyn was severely underleveled. I mean, in the single digits. It hadn't crossed my mind that we might have to use other party members to do the missions, and Ryuna just worked too well. This led to a maddening grind session to get Elwyn up to speed along with one of the worst boss fights in the game. Side note, you have to fight this boss 2 more times before the game is over. Inactive party members get a paltry amount of experience from missions, so the prospect that we would be forced to use specific party members in missions made me nervous. Fortunately, the only other time this popped up in the main plot was towards the end when Ryuna wasn't available. But I still had access to all the other party members, so I chose the late game Cupido, who was already leveled. Like 6. Character specific endings and the Bard song. On the subject of picking characters, there is a fun but entirely underutilized game mechanic, where you develop a relationship with whatever character you use most in missions. This will determine the character-specific ending where Xeon, I guess, has a conversation with whatever party member you chose to bring along. The clever part of this was that if you go and talk to a bard in the city, he'll tell you that he's composing a song about your heroic exploits. His song will give you hints as to which characters you're developing a relationship with. Ours was easy, as 99% of the missions had been with Ryuna, but the bard mechanic was clever nonetheless. May I also point out that the ending between Xeon and Ryuna was absolutely ridiculous. If Xeon was an enemy, he'd be dropping common loot. Dislike 5. Triggering missions. Okay, this is another short one, but nonetheless infuriating. In order to progress the story and unlock the next mission, you have to find the in-game trigger. These aren't telegraphed, nor are they obvious. Sometimes it's as simple as speaking with Pios. Other times, you just have to leave the tavern then return. But the majority of the time, the main trigger to progress the story is to speak with the NPCs scattered all over the city. Every single one. Running around blitzing through dialogue was a common occurrence during our playthrough. Like 5. The background art. Shining Tears was by no means a graphically impressive game, but I don't subscribe to the idea that hyper-reality means good graphics. In fact, the more artistic the game, the more it appeals to me. Now, like I mentioned, the character models range from "Ait" to "what the hell is that?" But what was extremely impressive was the hand-drawn background artwork. Grassy fields, intricate cobblestone towns, walkways among the clouds. The background art was legitimately impressive and looked like a painting. I wish that the characters had shared the picturesque, fantastical watercolor art style of Shining Tears world, but alas, they do not. Dislike 4. Your partner's AI. In every mission, you will be forced to take control of Xeon, and then you will pick one other party member to join you. That party member's controls are strange to say the least. You control them with the right joystick and the right bumper and trigger buttons. If you aren't controlling them, AI takes over. And it sucks. Like run straight into a group of enemies and wait for them to kill you suck. The AI is so bad that it makes the game nearly unplayable. Luckily, the devs were smart and threw in a multiplayer feature. Like 4. The good portrait art. Shining Tears actually marks one of the more significant departures in the Shining series. What started out as a first-person dungeon crawler, then moved to a series of tactics games on the Sega consoles, then moved back to a dungeon crawler, and finally landed on pseudo-Diablo-style isometric adventure games, always had one thing in common with its predecessors: the art style. Hidehiro Yoshida and Yoshitaka Tamaki's distinct cartoonish art style made these Shining titles instantly recognizable. But upon the release of Shining Tears, a new artist joined the series to bring his own more mature art style with sleeker, more anime-looking features and, well, sexier design. I didn't grow up a Shining fan, so the new art style didn't bother me. In fact, I think Tony Taka's artwork is fantastic. The characters are detailed in their portraits, and their expressions, though they all share the same Deadeye look, are expressive in their own right. I especially like the design of the female characters. I think Tony Taka leans towards a feminine design, which is why both Xeon and Kiner look so wimpy. But the female party members benefit from this style. Ryuna's priestly demeanor, hiding a rocking bod, Elwyn's sleek, sexy elven figure with a winged headband. Mao's probably the most generic looking. I feel like cat ninjas were definitely a thing in the 2000s. But I still enjoyed her. Overall, the character portraits of the main cast were great and deserve a shout out. Dislike 3. All the other portrait art. Like I said, there was obviously a shift in art style for the series during this game. But unfortunately, someone at Next Tech decided to shift only halfway. Aside from the main cast, all other portrait art is drawn in the old Shining style. And it just looks straight up bad. Not because it's bad art. I think if they had gone with this style for the entire game, then that would have been fine. Sure, it lacks Tony Taka's detail, but it at least reminds you of the old Shining titles. No, the real problem comes whenever the two different art styles are on the same screen together. This just makes the default art look cheap. I mean, look at this guy compared to Xeon and Elwyn. It's such a shocking difference that whatever investment you had in the story gets completely lost. Like 3. The end credits. No, this is not a joke. Yes, the end credits were great because it meant that I never have to play this game again. But aside from that, the end credits actually surprised me. Artwork was created to tie up the ending of each character, and it was some of the best artwork in the game. It got me thinking that perhaps they should have had still portrait cutscenes in-game to develop the characters more. I really enjoyed watching the credits, which is not a normal occurrence for me. But perhaps that's a testament to just how bad this game is. I watched the credits and enjoyed them. Dislike 2. The final mission. Alright, now we're getting into the meat of things. The final mission of Shining Tears is absolute torture, and instead of explaining why, I'm going to give you a preview into the worst 4 days of this challenge so far. You heard me. 4 days. Alright, so we start off okay here with a long hallway of spider enemies before reaching the end. But wait, there's more. Then we reach this room where we have to slowly, and I mean slowly, carve our way through these ridiculous laser spamming robots before reaching roadblock number 1. These little towers spawn endless amounts of poisoned zombies, and if you aren't fast, you can actually get soft locked here where enough enemies spawn to slow down your game completely. I finally had to blitz my way in and take it out, but there can't be too many more of these, right? right? The next level has 3 of these towers, 3. Fortunately, we had learned our lesson, and I ignored the enemies around me and just prayed I could destroy the towers before I was overwhelmed. At least until we got to the final one where we died and were so frustrated that Jet and I had to stop for the night. The next night, we picked up where we left off and was able to overcome the final generator. After this was a mini-boss that was a joke. I think the challenge is that he's an undead enemy and could respawn, but fortunately we had Ryuna. Of course, we have to destroy more towers after that. This was when I discovered how useful Zeon's lightning thrust attack was, and the towers went down a little easier than before. After leaving this room, we found ourselves mobbed immediately by a group of laser robots. The trick to this level was to find and kill the main robot, but I just indiscriminately killed until we found it. Now at this point, I'm thinking, alright, it's annoying, but whatever, we'll just keep grinding. The game obviously sensed this, so it turned up its bull meter to an 11. The next room had you fight these robots, whom, upon being destroyed, turned into smaller, faster robots that self-destruct near you. This slowed things significantly. In fact, it took us so long that Jet asked if we could stop, so we did. On the 3rd day, yes, you heard that, the 3rd day, we had to make our way through another thin, winding corridor full of kamikaze spirits and laser robots. Then we reached yet another thin, winding corridor, this time filled with those robots with the exploding heads. Then came another mini-boss that we had to first dash through a bunch of laser robots to reach. After a few attempts, we finally made it intact. The boss was a fire dragon that ended up being a bullet sponge. Now at this point you might be thinking, wow, you need to be near the end, right? Nope, we're halfway. What followed was entering an elevator where you have to fight a mob of poisoned zombies in a small circular arena. Not only was this difficult because of the closed space, but the moving background made visibility difficult. Once again, Jet asked if we could stop, and I agreed. Day 4, the final day. Jet and I committed to beating this and it took us an hour and 18 minutes to do so from this point. We cleared out the elevator, the entire time praying that we would reach the end, but alas, more enemies came crawling out of the doors. This time, they were minotaurs that could kill me in a single hit, accompanied by a horde of undead zombies. The level only required us to kill the minotaurs, so we ignored the zombies as best we could and was able to slowly defeat all the minotaurs. Just kidding, we died. I could have thrown my controller through the TV. We leveled up, restocked on healing items, and went back to the grind. With a newly vamped lightning thrust, I was able to beat all the minotaurs and move on to the next level, which ended up being the same as the fire dragon, but this time it was an ice dragon. So we had to dash through the mob of laser robots where Jet died. So we start all over and dash through the laser robots. Oops, Jet died again. Okay, so we dashed through the laser robots where I spammed all my healing herbs like a crackhead until we were able to reach the ice dragon. He went down with a few lightning strikes. Then we entered Hell, an elevator ride full of kamikaze robots. My patience were thin here, and I was actually physically angry at the game devs. Needless to say, we died. Multiple times. The issue was the space. There just wasn't any place to run, so if you got trapped with a group of exploding robots, you just had to die. I kind of just forced things until we got the right outcome and hoped that we were nearly at the end. We were not. Then came the most bullshit level of bullshit levels. We started out in the center of a bunch of high-leveled, high HP golems and minotaurs. I mean, look at this. There was literally nothing we could do. I have no idea how we pulled it off without dying, but I was able to defeat all the minotaurs and move on to the final boss. Just kidding. This was where the absolute ridiculous low quality of this game peaked. I mean, just look at this. My computer could barely run it. I can't imagine what this mob was like on the original hardware. Fortunately, we literally slogged through this last mob, broke through, and made it to the final boss. Like 2. Ryuna. Each party member in Shining Tears has a niche. Volg buffs counters. Niche specializes in ice damage. L1 is your long-range fighter, but none of them carry the sheer usefulness of Ryuna. You see, when you're playing through a game you just don't want to play, you want to take the path of least resistance. Ryuna is that path. She is both the only healer and buffer, along with the only character that can exorcise the undead. Sure, she has almost no means of damage, but the battle system here isn't very intricate. Getting damage is just kind of the process. With Jet spamming Ryuna's heal, I was able to slowly plow my way through our 13-hour playthrough with minimal grinding. I also love her design. The Eastern undertones in her clothing hiding a massive set of bazingas made her a low-key waifu, not gonna lie. Dislike 1. monotony.
C. C.
Healing light.
C.
Like 1. Co-op mode. The single saving grace of this title is that you could suffer through it with a friend. After you get through the initial first missions of the game, co-op is unlocked and second player can choose to play as any of the party members aside from Xeon. First, the AI is absolutely terrible, and with Jet playing as Ryuna, I was practically invincible. Second is that playing this game solo would take the monotony to another level, as it would just be you and the controller slogging through this exercise in perseverance. All in all, making Shining Tears with a couch co-op function elevated the game quite a bit. Not to the point where I would suggest it, but I was grateful to have my son along for the ride. The best thing I can say about Shining Tears is that at times it felt adequate. Neither the story nor its gameplay managed to produce anything from me other than apathetic boredom. You know a game is bad when you find yourself admiring the hand-painted backgrounds as you mash the X button through long-winded missions. The final mission being a punishing 2 hours long. A character-specific ending, semi-enjoyable final boss, and appealing artwork during the end credits was a decent send-off to a PS2 title I will never play again. And that's my review. If you'd like to support me in this challenge, click on the link below and check out my perks for Patreon members. Also, if you would like to follow along with my playthroughs, subscribe to this and my other channel, Low Cloud and Gameplay. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you all later.